Okay, we're going to do another Brandon Joe Williams video review, and it amazes me. And actually, there's something that I've been thinking, and I've probably said something on other videos about it a few times, but it is very curious to me how these people this guy, and then you've got Yusufel, and there's a whole bunch of people that are doing this stuff, and they're all saying basically the same thing, and they're all on each other's podcasts. Like how this guy gets, and again, I don't have anything personally against Brandon. He may be a perfectly nice guy, but I don't understand how they get so popular on all of these different. It's like they're all sharing the same information, misinformation, and they're all on each other's podcasts talking about, essentially making it look like something is going on that isn't. And so I thought we'd go through his little video here and see what he has to say and how it applies and what we know to be true and false. So here we go.
I'll just do a video course, and I'll just take my entire state national theory page, which had grown and expanded dramatically during that time period, and I'll just make a video version of the state national theory page. So I had 37 different points on my state national theory page at that time. So I was like, all right, I'll just make 37 videos. And so I went through.
Okay, so one of the things that's interesting about what he's talking about, so Brandon has a free video course, and I give him kudos because he's not charging money for any of this stuff. So that part of him I definitely respect. But he did this training series that everybody is all up and excited about, and I had gone, when I first ran across him, I had gone and downloaded his page and started reading it to see, what exactly it is. And if you, let me pull up my stuff here. I have a special section on his website. So this is the link to his actual website. Now, the page that he's talking about here is a state national theory page, and it gets you. He's changed the page since the last time I was over here. Click here to download the 6th edition. We'll just do this and see what this is. Or no, this is the Black's Law Dictionary. Let me get off of that. Oh, here, so you just scroll down. So this gets you to his documentation, and you'll notice here, Lordy be, good grief. You'll notice that he gets into all cap names, and he gets into birth certificate of live birth, and all of this bullshit. It is all Anna von Wright, sovereign citizen malarkey. It doesn't have any basis in fact. It has no basis in any legislative actions. No grammar dictionary describes any of this stuff. It's literally made up stuff. And one of the things that, that I keep talking about that is kind of a bother to me is that I gotta go back and find the damn weird, right? Page we were on now. But one of the things that I've been trying to get people to stop doing is that every time they repeat a bullshit line, it makes all of us look stupid. So now when I stand up and I start talking about something that is similar to what Brandon's talking about, but not the same, I'm immediately put into the bucket with Brandon or with a sovereign citizen because I sound like them. But in reality, we couldn't be farther apart. So his webpage that he's talking about and his course that he built to give away for free, he tells you he's going to teach you about trusts. that video course, I've watched the whole thing. That video course literally has not a single video that teaches you anything about a trust. It's just he keeps talking about it, but he never actually talks about any details. So the whole thing is crazy. It literally is an uninformative thing, and yet thousands of people are following this guy, and I don't get it. I really don't. But let's keep going.
Through, and I made 37 videos, and I all I did, I'm telling you, all I did was think, eat, sleep, and shit that course, and how for about 5 weeks. During that, I continued my research, and I continued to update my state national theory page. But going is what a lot of all this stuff came from, right? So I had a small fan base prior doing all this, my like cool stuff and jokes and all this kind of stuff, right? Promise of I'm the greatest blank, fill in the blank. Kid back then. So I just didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. Then I found all of this information, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, right? So then I created the course, and if you watch the course at the top, it just has my name. There was no logo. There was no brand at that. Of humanity, literally, right? And there's other things that I talk about in there. I talk about how lawyers suck dick, like circuit, really, that you jam up people's asses because they're I was serious, right?
Right.
So I got a few submissions, and then I was very, very active with my fan base in showing them those. It became that I need all 3 of these. I can't just have one. And they said, okay. They said, you're going to have to pay like 3 times, basically, and you're going to have to award all 3 of them the money. I said, fuck it. So I bought 3 different logos. And so to do with those that are popping up, we have a group in London, online. It's becoming sort of like a commune, like an online commune where we exchange information and stuff like that and help, but it's like it's non-monetary, essentially, basically.
Yeah. So right now, everybody that's listening to this is probably wondering what the fuck we're talking about. So I want to give people an overview of One Stupid Fuck and the Contract Killer course, and to give them the macro perspective, and then start to explain what is actually going on and how some of this stuff is legitimate. And start at jurisdiction, and to understand jurisdiction. I saw a video where this guy said, if you're an employee of Walmart and the manager says, look, you got to wear this uniform, you have to, if you want the job there, you're going to have to wear the uniform. Now, if that manager said, I want you to work at 3 a.m, now he's outside of the jurisdiction of what he's capable to do, and you had some ability to push back, right? Because he's outside of that jurisdiction. And so if you think of that Walmart as a corporation, and the manager and you being an employee of that corporation, there's certain things that you have to follow in order to be that employee.
I do want to point out that was a horrible analogy, because I don't even know what to say to that bad analogy. Walmart can make you work at 3 a.m. if they need you to work at 3 a.m.
If you zoom out a little bit, you have the city that Walmart is in, and that Walmart may need to follow certain code for how they create the building and things of that nature. Then you have the state, right? That's a bigger jurisdiction. You have what we think is the United States and the Constitution and all that, but that's the layer that a lot of people are getting lost in. And that layer is really a corporate layer. So can you please explain the whole U.S. corporation, quote unquote, theory or fact? And I say that because I know some people are going to hear this, going to go, that just sounds crazy. Other people like yourself, myself, who have delved into it, would go, oh, nope, there it is. It's right there in black and white. So can you explain to folks what the U.S. corporation is and how we sort of got into this mess?
Yeah, I mean, I always do a show and tell, obviously, because like my whole brand is literally One Stupid Fuck, and I'm a goddamn pickle. So I don't know why anyone trusts anything I have to say, and that's kind of part of the fun. It's challenging for me. So if somebody listening to this podcast were to go to Google and you just type in 28 space USC, which stands for United States Code, space 3002, and push enter, you're going to see a link for Cornell University, and then you're going to click on that, and it's going to say 28 US code, and then it's going to have this little weird S circle symbol, which means section, and then 3002, and then it's going to say definitions. And you're going to scroll down to definition number 15. Definition number 15 is United States means, and then section A, it says a federal corporation.
So we've already covered this a little bit. Well, actually, we covered it a good bit. He's totally misreading that section. There's actually multiple things that the term United States means in that particular section, and I think 28 is banking or something to do with banking. But so what that section is actually saying is that when the term United States is used within the section that you're actually looking at, it could mean a federal corporation. It could mean, and by the way, a federal corporation does not mean the federal government is a corporation. It doesn't mean the United States is a corporation. It means a corporation that has been set up in the federal government or within the federal rules and regulations. So it is a federal corporation. So when the term United States is used in that code section, it could mean a federal corporation. And then it goes on to list a few other things that it could also mean. So he's completely misreading this particular code section and trying to imply that it means the United States is a corporation, but he has absolutely no other evidence, and that's not evidence. It's actually misreading the actual code as it's presented.
So you don't need to take my word for it. You can look it up for yourself. And then the second thing that someone is going to look up is they're going to go to Google again in a new tab or a new window. And UCC stands for Uniform Commercial Code. They're going to type in UCC space 9-307. Hit enter. You're going to go to Cornell University. There's other websites you can use. I like Cornell the most. So whatever. You're going to click on that. It's going to say it had that little weird S with the circle in the middle, which means section symbol again. And then it's going to say 9-307 location of debtor. You're going to go down to subsection H. Subsection H says location of United States. And then below that, it says the United States is located in the District of Columbia. So
that particular code section, and we've also looked at that, that code section is a little bit of a confusing thing because first off, the UCC is actually pure banking stuff. You'll hear him talk about UCC in a minute with respect to driver's licenses and automobiles and all that bullshit. But the UCC is only banking. And the states have adopted the UCC code in their respective code sections, but it's only related to banking stuff. It's not related to driving or any of the other stuff that they claim. In that code section, it does say that the term United States within the context of that code is to be located in the District of Columbia. Well, you obviously can't take the 50 states and stick them all into the District of Columbia. And so my argument, the reason that I've used that particular code section is that it actually shows that the term United States does not always mean the 50 states. And so the assumption in Title 26, when they say that the United States is the all 50 states, well, that's not a good assumption because there are other code sections that clearly show that term does not always mean the 50 states. So I do use that code section, but not in the way that he's actually attempting to use it.
If someone's listening to the audio on this, they can just rewind and pause and look those up for themselves, and they can see that in black and white right there, boom, for themselves. They don't need to take my word for it. So essentially what it is the United States is located only and exclusively in the District of Columbia. So when you're filling out a tax form, let's say
again, be careful because I want to be careful because I'm not saying that the United States only exists in the District of Columbia. It depends on what you're talking about. the context is extremely important. If I say the United States talking to a friend, I'm talking about the whole country. If you're reading a code section and it says the term United States and it provides a specific definition within the context of that code section, then that is the definition for the United States within the context of that code section. Him making that blanket statement that he just made is an outright lie, and I don't think he's doing it. Well, I don't know. This whole thing is so confusing as to how this guy is getting more and more popular and who's behind him. Like I don't even know what he does for a living, but where is he getting the time to put all this bullshit together? And then he's getting all these people to go follow him and believe that he actually knows what he's talking about. He's literally, and I'm going to tell you something else. I've sent him multiple emails, and he does respond back, but his responses are generally some emoji or some stupid shit. It's not actually any kind of intelligent response. So there is someone sitting behind the keyboard, but I don't know who it is, and I don't know what their end game is, because what he's actually promoting is going to get a bunch of people in jail. It's not actually going to do anything. And another interesting aspect of what he pushes is to get people free shit, like get your credit cards, all the bills on your credit card reject or done away with. So it's, he's promoting things that are getting people to want to follow him. So I understand that aspect of it, but everything that he's saying is so crazy that I don't get where it all came from.
W-9 form or a 1040 or whatever different form you're going to be filling out. The question they're asking you is, how much money did you make from the United States or from areas within the United States or as a resident of the United States? What they're asking you is only and exclusively the District of Columbia.
Now, that part of what he said, I don't disagree with. That I do believe, based on my research, that is exactly what is being said in the context of Title 26. So I'll give him kudos on that, because that is, in my opinion, a correct interpretation of that particular section of the code.
When you sign a W-9 form, if we go online, and I mean, this blows everybody's mind. This blows accountants' minds. This blows bookkeepers' minds. It blows HR minds. Yep. People start fucking freaking out, losing their shit. People, I've had so many lawyers just start screaming, totally freaking out, having like psychotic mental breakdowns on some of this stuff, right? So if you pull,
I'm also going to say that claim is bullshit, because I can't even get attorneys to have a conversation with me paying them. So I don't know. He doesn't look like he has that much money. I can't see him going out and hiring a bunch of attorneys to have conversations with them about it. In fact, every attorney that I've had a conversation with about it, they have no idea anything about the Constitution. If you mention the Constitution to an attorney, they glass over. They have no idea what the hell you're talking about. So that claim right there is absolute bullshit. He's lying that he's talked to all these people and that they had this psychotic episode because of whatever the hell he's about to say.
Pull up a W-9 form or W-9 is what everybody pretty much knows. If you have a job and you work for a company, you signed a W-9 form. It's like a totally standard form. Everybody fills it out. Now, under Part 2, if you pull up the W-9 form under Part 2, it says, under penalties of perjury, I certify that. And then point number 3 is, I am a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person. Now, the word U.S., the term U.S. is short for United States. United States is defined as an unknown location located only and exclusively inside the District of Columbia. Then the word.
I'm assuming that he's getting that because he's mixing the UCC together with he doesn't really explain that. I don't know what he's talking about at that particular point. Again, I do agree that the United States in the context of Title 26, which is where the W-9 form shows up, it is a confusing definition, and based on all the other definitions and all the other context, you could assume that they're only talking about the District of Columbia. His thing that he just mentioned sounded like he's talking about the location of debtor, which is a completely different section of the code and can't be applied in Title 26.
Citizen, you look that up in Black's Law Dictionary because it's the legal definition. Citizen means somebody who gives dominion or power over to another entity in exchange for protection of their privileges or rights. So U.S. citizen, when you define it, it means somebody who gives dominion to the District of Columbia, which is a private foreign corporate zone, in exchange for protection of their privileges, right? Now,
again, the problem that Brandon has, and it's, I mean, in his defense, it's extremely complicated the way this is all set up. But the problem is that he just committed, and you have to be very careful not to do this, is that he just took a definition from the UCC code, combined it with a definition from Title 26, or Title 28, I think is where he was, then went to look up citizenship and took that definition and the term United States there to imply something yet again different. So we have to be careful not to go crazy with these definitions, because you've got to stay within the context of what it is that you're talking about. You can't jump out and go grab definitions from other sections, and especially from Black's Law, when that particular thing is actually supplied to you in the code section that you're in if you went and looked. So it's, and I'm not saying in this particular situation that's the case, but you've got to be very careful that you don't jump outside your jurisdiction, as it were, and grab definitions from unrelated code sections and dictionaries.
Now, the problem with that is you state that you live in Washington, D.C. when you state that you're a U.S. citizen. Washington, D.C. is not in America. It's a foreign, completely separate zone from America. When you do that, you are not an American anymore. When you are no longer an American, you don't have constitutional rights. You don't have the Bill of Rights. You don't have the right against self-incrimination as per the Fifth Amendment. You don't have the right to freedom of speech as per the First Amendment. You don't have any of these things anymore. So you go into a courtroom and you say, I'm a citizen, I have rights. You don't. You don't have any rights at all whatsoever. And then you hire a lawyer, and then there's other laws that say when you hire a lawyer, you waive all your rights. So you actually don't have any rights, and then you waive not having any rights. So you're like doubly fucked.
So I will say that particular statement was not entirely false. That does hold some validity, because we are being treated as if we're 14th Amendment citizens. Now, when I talked to Juan Galt, he insisted that we all are 14th Amendment citizens, that we have no choice, that they sucked us into this citizenship, even though the whole thing was passed for slavery. Somehow they've just sucked everybody up into it, and that we are all 14th Amendment citizens. I disagree with that, because I don't live in the District of Columbia, and that whole thing is literally federal citizenship. So I don't really agree with the fact that the federal, and it gets complicated, because the federal government has jurisdiction in the 50 states for certain things like banking and that kind of thing. And the 14th Amendment says that anyone born in the United States and under the jurisdiction thereof. Well, the question is are you under the jurisdiction of the federal government just because you were born in the 50 states? And my contention is that you're not. So you're not under the jurisdiction of the federal government. You're under the jurisdiction of the state, unless you do business, unless you conduct activities within the jurisdiction of the United States, then you're under their jurisdiction. But when I'm born, I don't have a bank account. I don't have a social security number. I don't have any of this stuff. And so declaring me a 14th Amendment citizen, at that point, I was not under the jurisdiction of the federal government at the point that I was actually born in one of the several states. So I disagree with that aspect of it, and I think that's one of the reasons that you have to declare that you are a United States citizen. So you are giving up your rights when you do that, but you have to be careful because you always have to make sure you're within the context of what you think you're talking about before you start throwing definitions around.
And then you show up and then you say, I have rights. And then they throw you in jail for contempt of court because you totally do not have absolutely any rights at all whatsoever. And actually, in fact, after a long, long time of studying this, I finally did locate exactly what the right of a U.S. citizen is. And a U.S. citizen only has one single solitary right, and that's as per the Supreme Court. And I will tell you what that right is right now. But can you guess what that right is?
You have the right to pay taxes.
Nope.
I don't.
Nope.
I'm not sure. And to be clear, just for anybody that's listening, what you're talking about by saying a U.S. citizen, this is what's been helpful about your course, is sort of redefining some of these words so that we understand the relationships. It's almost like an employee to the U.S. corporation.
Exactly.
So you're talking about what is the right of that employee/citizen to the U.S. corporation. I don't know. What is it?
So here, this court case, U.S. versus Valentine. It's a Supreme Court case. The exact quote on this court case is, the only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. So the only right that you have as a U.S. citizen is to be physically located inside the District of Columbia.
So
now, if you go look up the case that he's actually talking about, I don't remember the full context of it at this particular point, but the problem with some of these court cases, and you have to be very careful about quoting them, is you really need to understand the context of what that court case was actually talking about as to whether or not what they said applies to your current condition, like your current situation. So those are not the only rights that we have as United States citizens. Even if you are a United States citizen, you do have due process rights. That might be the only right that you have as a United States citizen, because that's all it gave you. If you go read the 14th Amendment, where it creates the United States citizenship, the only right that it actually listed there is the right to due process. So that they couldn't give you, as a 14th Amendment citizen, they could not give you the Bill of Rights, because they could after they created the 14th Amendment citizen, but all the rights before it, they couldn't give that to this new federal citizenship. And that's why there are court cases that talk about the fact that a state citizen has got completely different rights than a 14th Amendment citizen. So again, what he quoted, the court did in fact insinuate what he just said. That quote that he just gave you is not exactly what the court case says, but it is an interesting take nonetheless.
Again, this is going to be crazy confusing for somebody who's just now hearing this for the very first time. I've been looking at this for a little over a year now, here and there, not as intense as you have. Your course has been very helpful to lift the veil a little bit. Again, this is for informational, educational, is corporate organizations, and we have unknowingly contracted ourselves into commercial agreement with these entities. If you have contract,
you didn't know what you were signing. You thought that U.S. citizen meant someone who lives in the 50 states of the Republic. That's not what it means at all. Not even close. The way that the government looks at it is that they didn't.
Again, be careful, because some of the forms actually do mean that. It depends on the section of the code that actually created this form, or what this form is actually meant to collect information for. So sometimes the United States actually does mean the 50 states. You can't just blanketly say what he just said.
Force you to sign anything. You signed it of your own free will, and you signed it under penalty of perjury. So you're a perjurer. So perjury is a felony. Perjury is, I believe it's up to country is basically all criminals to them. That's guys in anything. You sign that totally of your own free will, stating that you live in the District of Columbia. Being the District of Columbia becomes involved in interstate commerce, and as a resident, meaning a resident of Washington, D.C., they do not have the common law right to travel as a citizen of one of the several states has. So basically, a U.S. citizen has only one right, which is to residence inside of Washington, D.C.
So I missed that court case because I was fast forwarding over all of the mumbo jumbo, but it's kind of irrelevant. That court case is actually about someone that literally lives in the District of Columbia, traveling outside of the District of Columbia and not having a proper identification on their tag on their car. Now, it is worth mentioning this is a 1900 code or violation and court case. It's not anything recent, and in that particular case, they ruled that the guy didn't have the freedom of travel because of the fact that he came from the District of Columbia. It does not say what he's insinuating that it's saying, which is that we're all District of Columbia drivers and therefore we have no rights. That's not at all what that court case actually said.
When they leave Washington, D.C., they essentially become a rightsless, privilegeless, lost nomad. Drifts a permit to carry a gun. That's why you have to get a fishing license, and they just keep issuing more and more and more of these licenses. Because the thing is that you don't have any rights. You are not you do those things. It gets more complicated though, because technically speaking, those licenses only work in Washington, D.C. The right or the ability to require someone to have a license to do anything outside of Washington, D.C. So the whole thing is all just a giant joke. You don't have.
Again, none of that's true. The states actually are the ones that are issuing fishing licenses and carry permits and all that stuff. It's not, and driver's license. It's not the federal government doing any of that. So he's completely misconstruing what's actually taking place.
Even with a driver's license, you don't have the right to drive. You only have the right to drive with the driver's license in Washington, D.C.
So there's going to be a lot of people that hear that and go, dude, that's crazy. We've been doing this for decades, if not centuries. Like, well, cars have been around for just over 100 years, whatever. But what are you talking about? What are you fucking talking about? My dog. There's going to be a lot of people that think that, say that, and I get that. I think where the proof of the pudding for me has been is that I've started to see and research and started to understand, first of all, constitutionally, we have a right to travel. If I'm wrong, Brandon, but when you get a driver's license, you're essentially saying, I need this license because I'm conducting commercial, I'm either for hire or conducting commercial baseball fields and work and whatever. You can tag
motor carrier.
What?
It's a private motor carrier DOT number.
Got it.
All right. So that was just a bunch of craziness. So they literally believe that the driver's license is a federal driver's license and it only gives you the right to drive in the District of Columbia because they don't understand anything about state jurisdiction and state codes. The fact is, and we've talked about it in other videos, the states all have their own codes. They're not part of the the federal government. They look similar because they're all organized in similar ways, but all of the states have their own codes, with the exception of the UCC stuff, because they did adopt the UCC because banking is a federal thing. But they all have their own codes, their own definitions, their own specifications, their own requirements. And for you to do what Brandon is attempting to do, and the fellow here is Wired for Impact, they are trying to allude to the fact that everything's federal, and that's just not the case. It is a complicated bunch of craziness, but it is not at all what they're describing. So I don't know, either they are really ignorant about what they're talking about, potentially stupid, but or they're plants and they're trying to get people in trouble or trying to make the rest of us look stupid if we repeat what it is that they're actually pushing.
That's a recent discovery, by the way. You call the DOT and they'll act like you're an idiot for not knowing about this. We didn't even know about this. So the DOT is the Department of Transportation, is the actual entire department of the government. So the government has 15 different departments, like the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Interior. Okay.
Mhm.
One of the departments of the government is the Department of Transportation. And people have seen that, like on motorcycle helmets, you have DOT approved. And, DOT is not a completely foreign idea to people, right? Now, the Department of Motor Vehicles is a subsection of the Department of Transportation. So people have this flipped around. They think that the Department of Motor Vehicles is senior to the Department of Transportation. That is not true at all. The Department of Transportation is as high as it goes on the food chain of the section of the government that deals with transportation. It doesn't go any higher than the DOT. Okay. So that's the first thing. Second thing, inside the Department of Motor Vehicles, they deal only with motor vehicles. Common sense. The definition of motor vehicle is something of which is basically only used for commerce. It's commerce only.
Again, he is only looking at the federal codes to get that definition. If you go to the USC codes and you look up the definition of a motor vehicle, he's right. That's it. If you go look up the definition of motor vehicle, driver, any of this stuff in any of the 50 states, he looks like an idiot, because that's not what the definition says. And they try to imply that federal code overrides the state codes, but that's moronic. It's not true at all. So if you want to have a conversation with somebody with a brain about driving and whether or not you have to have a license, you have to pick a state, go to that state and have that conversation within the context of that state. You can't globally declare that driver is one thing and globally declare that a motor vehicle, it has this definition. It is entirely false. So this whole thing right here that he's going through, and I'm going to skip through a lot of it, it's all moronic. All it does is show how truly ignorant he is on how all these code sections are set up. I want to say also, I have communicated with him on this fact, as well as his buddy, I can't remember his name at this point, but his buddy over on Rumble that also talks about all this stuff. And both of them just try to act like I'm stupid and I don't know what I'm talking about. So they have been approached with the fact that they're wrong about what they're talking about, and neither one of them will admit that they are, which is another reason that it makes me wonder if these guys are a plant to try to get all of us in trouble if we're dumb enough to follow them.
Now, if you go outside of the Department of Motor Vehicles and you go up the food chain to the big boy, to the big daddy, the Department of Transportation, the numbers are not issued to motor vehicles. DOT numbers are issued to motor carriers. Motor carrier is an entirely different term. Motor carrier can be either commerce or non-commerce. A motor vehicle cannot be non-commerce. Physically impossible. So, like, a lot of times you'll see in like a lot of the sovereign citizen type videos and stuff like that, the guy gets pulled over and he says, "Oh, I'm in my private mode of conveyance," or blah 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 blah. There's nothing to argue about. Are you in a motor vehicle or are you in a motor carrier? That's the first question, right? Now, if you are in a motor carrier, the second question is, are you in a for-hire motor carrier, which is their words, not mine.
All right, we're going to skip through some of this because this is all just moronic stuff. It's crazy. He's literally talking about DOT as if it's a national organization. There is no DOT. I mean, their DOT, I guess, is national because we have federal roads. But each state has their own DOTs. And if you get a DOT number, and the funny thing is that Joe Piasta or whatever his buddy on Rumble, they've got videos of Joe being pulled over, having his car taken from him being put in jail, him going to court and losing. All of that stuff is documented, and he had a DOT number on his car. It didn't matter. He still ended up losing his car and having a bunch of legal problems that he had to deal with, and they have no idea. I mean, and on one hand, I give them a little kudos because they're at least fighting the system and trying to figure out how everything's working. But some of this stuff is just pure stupidity. Like, if you're not willing to actually listen and accept the fact that you might be wrong about some of the things that you're implying, I don't feel sorry for you anymore. Like, you're in the beginning, I tried to help. I tried to explain to you that this is the way this is actually working and you're reading this wrong. And if you're not going to listen, then it's on you, whatever happens to you. So all this DOT stuff is nonsense. Brandon will lose his car at some point. He will go to jail for not having a license. He just hasn't been caught yet.
Mine. Or are you in a private motor carrier? To get a for hire motor carrier, it's that they drive with no plates. Now, if you get a private motor carrier DOT, so if you have 22 cars because you're Jay Leno, I have mine sitting right over here. I haven't put them on yet. This is fairly new, all this information. So if you have 22 private motor carriers,
notice he's pushing information and he's so sure about all this, but he hasn't even put his DOT tags because he's made these up. He lied on a federal form saying that he had a trust registered in another country in order to get a DOT number, and then he's got these tags, but he hasn't put them on his car. And the reason is because the Joe guy that I was talking about, or whatever his name is on Rumble, he actually went to jail for having those DOT tags on his car. So this whole thing is just insane.
Carriers, you would order 44 plates, 30. You don't on because it's no longer a commerce motor or carrier.
What I've been finding out in a lot of this stuff is that there are manuals and that there are resources, like you mentioned earlier, the UCC Uniform Commercial Code, USC, the United States Code. The other one that I found very interesting that you mentioned was the styles manual. If something's in all caps, what does that mean? If something has capital first letter and then lowercase, what does that mean? All of this stuff can be researched and validated. So as you're listening to this, if you're
I definitely want to stop here. That styles manual that he's talking about, it doesn't exist. They can't produce a single piece of evidence that says anything about uppercase letters. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I am so sick of hearing about uppercase letters that I could scream. It is bullshit. It has no bearing whatsoever on any factual context of anything that is going on. There are games being played, and we don't know the rules of those games, but this ain't one of them. This whole thing about uppercase letters, when you start talking about the uppercase letters in your name, I think you're telling the court immediately that you're an idiot. You have no idea what the hell's going on, and they're going to take advantage of you because you're an idiot. So stop talking about uppercase letters and all this stuff because it has no bearing on what is going on in society today.
If you're rolling your eyes or if you're going, wait, that doesn't make sense, or what are you talking about? Categorically, there is some type of resource that you can go to that literally plainly spells these things out.
So you can go online and type in, what is the definition of motor carrier? What is the definition of motor vehicle? You can even type in like USC space definition space of space motor space carrier motor carrier permit, right? So you actually need the DOT number. If you're not,
States pursuant to the DOT number license plates on a nation of the U.S. corporation, which I believe was in the 1930s.
No, 1871. Organic
Oh.
Act of 1871.
Organic Act of 1871. So that was when the term we now think of as the United States actually as a corporation was created, correct?
That's also when the word
Oh my God, these guys are so stupid. It makes my head hurt. The Organic Act of 1871 formed a corporation for the District of Columbia because at that particular point in time, and there's legislation for this, by the way. There's no legislation to support anything else this dumbass is saying, but there is legislation about the District of Columbia. But at the time, they literally had 3 different jurisdictions because of their location. That 10-mile square area is located in 3 different jurisdictions, and it was causing a nightmare for them to try to deal with all of the city stuff because at that time the Washington D.C. was growing like crazy, and they were having a horrible time trying to figure out in what area they could do what. And so they removed all of that, formed a corporation for the District of Columbia, not the United States. It doesn't have anything to do with the term United States being incorporated. It is only about the District of Columbia. So that entire conversation is so dumb and has absolutely no supportable evidence to back up anything this moron is saying at this particular point in time.
word person was redefined as well.
Explain that, because that's a big one. That's and another really good one to help people go, oh wait, maybe not everything as I thought it was is as it seems. So yeah, explain what the definition of person is.
So if you go onto Google again, and you're going to type in, this time you're going to type in 26 space USC space 7701, hit enter, go to Cornell University. It's going to say 26 US code section 7701 definitions. You're going to go down to definition number 1. And by the way, this definition is also locatable on the lower part where there's instructions on almost every IRS form. So you can find this definition very, very easily looking on IRS forms as well. Definition number 1, person. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation.
So when most of us hear the word person, we think people, human flesh people. This redefines and helps people understand, oh, when they're saying, are you a person in the United States? What they could potentially be saying is, are you a trust? Are you a corporation in this entity called the United States Corporation? Are you a subset?
They were doing so well. So that is the definition of person. And the thing to take away from this is that a person is not a human being. It doesn't necessarily mean a human being. So when they define what a person is, you have to ask, what are these things? So the only thing that I have an issue with in that particular context is they never define what an individual is. So we would imply that an individual is actually a human being, but there's other code sections that did define what a human or what a individual was, and they define it as not being a human being. It's actually a citizen of the United States. So, but the problem is that within the context of Title 26, there is no definition for an individual, and so the question has to be an individual what? An individual company, an individual trust. I mean, what is meant by the term individual? Because they didn't say natural person, which is the proper definition for a human being as far as the legal goes. So a natural person is me. But an individual doesn't give me any context as to being what that individual represents. And so the definition in Title 26, I argue, is not actually a natural person because it doesn't ever tell me what it specifically is. But it has nothing to do with the United States. It is actually the definition. If you look up the definition of person in the Black's Law Dictionary, it gives you a similar definition. And one of the reasons is because when they created this thing back in I think it was the late 1870s or 1800s or early 1900s, they created this thing called a corporation. And when they did that, they didn't want to have to write a whole separate bunch of code for corporations. And so they declared that a corporation was similar and had the same rights as a person and a natural person. And therefore the code, when they write these code, they give you this definition of person to include companies because they treat them the same. They have to abide by the same rules and regulations and everything else. So that's the reason that they did it. It is nefarious. It is bullshit that a company gets the same rights as I have, but it's what they've done until we actually do something about correcting it.
Of this corporation. So I think this is actually the 1930s figure that I was actually thinking of, where they created the trusts, the Cestui Trust.
So the 30s, a lot of things happened in the 30s. You have all the trusts were created through the Social Security Act, and then you also have the Emergency Banking Act, where they took away all the gold and they converted everything over to debt instruments and just debt.
Is it not? That's when we got central banking. Is that correct? I believe that's
no. Central banking was the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
Or 1913. That's what it was. Okay. Yep. So a lot of that started in the 1913 then, when the central bank came in, or was it the gold thing?
A lot of all this craziness really, I mean, the country pretty much went to shit in the 1870s. Is pretty much 1860s, 1870s. That's pretty much when, after the Civil War, during the Reconstruction, that's when the 14th Amendment was made. That's when the word person was redefined. That's when the government was bankrupted and closed and then reopened as a corporation. That's when basically everything happened, right after the Civil War.
So, dude, this is mind-blowing. Again, for people that are just now finding this out, this is fascinating and obviously history that we don't know a lot about. But when you understand that, the country went bankrupt, central banking came in, they created a U.S. corporation. Explain what the Cestui Trust.
The timeline is a little bit different. So you have the Civil War, and then after that you have the Reconstruction. That's the way it's described in history books, right? The Reconstruction after the Civil War.
Okay.
At that time period, that's when the entire government was closed, the original government, and then a duplicate clone government was opened that was incorporated, and that was.
Okay, this whole story is something that goes around the internet very toughly. Like it's everywhere. Is there any validity to what he's saying? Because he's not the one saying this. He's literally getting all of this information from what other people have said with absolutely no verifications or proof of any of it. Like literally nothing that he's about to say about this whole process can be validated by any documentation. So now, is it true? Sure, it's possible. It is possible that this is what happened. But the problem that I have is that if you're going to be honest and research this, and you can't find a single piece of evidence to support that particular statement, then we shouldn't be saying it. Like, at least wait until you have evidence to support it before you can say it. You could say that maybe this is what happened, but you just don't have any information to support it. It's like the flag that Brandon is flying behind him. That flag has absolutely zero evidence that it ever existed. And yet morons like him fly it as if it has some meaning, and it doesn't have any meaning. That it's literally just a made up flag. So you have to be careful about repeating these things that these people are saying, because unless you could actually point to, I'll give you a good example, and we've talked about it before, is the multiple constitution argument. Unless you can give me multiple copies of a constitution that have different words in them, it's pointless. Like you can talk about it all day long, but if you can't supply the evidence to support what you're talking about, then you might as well not talk about it.
All that information is located in what's called the Organic Act of 1871. During that time, the word person was redefined to include a corporation or a trust or an association or a partnership. During that time is when a lot of crazy things happened. Terror. We have the Federal Reserve.
Oh,
That's
sorry,
also that's
with the
also
Social
when they
Securities Act.
yeah.
Oh,
So
I
the
thought it
Social
happened earlier
Security
than
the Social Security Act made all of us collateral on the debts. Okay. People are collateral now, right? Because people are. So basically, what happens is during that same time period, that's also when they created the whole birth certificate scam and all that kind of stuff, right? So all of that was born out of the Social Security Act. And then it was also all the gold was seized in the Emergency Banking Act. The Emergency Banking Act.
So this Social Security thing is another thing that they talk about all the time, along with the birth certificates and this société, I can't say that word, trust. Again, no evidence. The Organic Act of 1871 had nothing in it about redefining person and all the other bullshit that he's talking about. It had nothing to do with any of the Federal Reserve, Social Security, any of that stuff. It was in 1871. So all of these claims are made up bullshit that people have thrown out on the internet, and then we turn around and repeat them. Now, I'm going to save the rest of this video for another video because it's way too long. But the point is that we've got to stop putting out misinformation and stop following idiots like this that refuse to listen to facts and just keep pushing bad information out because it sounds cool, because it's, you know, it's sexy to go out and talk about all these secret, you know, things that have happened that have hidden all this secret stuff from us, when in reality, we're all just stupid. We don't know the Constitution. The Constitution is not complicated. The Constitution is a very simple document. I won't say very simple, but it is fairly simple. And it set up the federal government, listed out what they could do, and said what they can't do. It didn't say what they can't do. It only gave them what they can do. When they act outside of that jurisdiction, outside of that capability, and we don't say anything about it, it's on us. So we can't sit here and talk about secret organizations and all this other bullshit if we don't have evidence about it. All we have to do is sit here and talk about how stupid our ancestors were and how stupid we are for allowing all of this nonsense to continue. So we'll pick up this video in the next video, and whenever I can get time to continue listening to these morons, and we'll see where we end up at that. But I'm going to end this today. Thank you for watching, and have a great week.